their lives. As we think about Jesus the carpenter, we've got to understand a little bit about carpentry in the time of Jesus, because a carpenter in the time of Jesus could mean a number of things. The Greek word is tekton, and it is a word that can refer to a worker in wood or a worker in stone. It can refer to one who is a planner, a designer. A lot involved in this word carpenter. When we think about what Jesus was doing, when we think about a builder or a designer, that aspect of carpentry in the first century, we have to think about Hebrews 12 and verse 2, where we look to Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. Now, those aren't the same Greek words, but the same concept is there. He is the author and the finisher of our faith. He started our faith and He finished our faith. He's the one that is the builder of our faith. What a beautiful picture and description that is of our Lord. But when you think about the things that Jesus may have or could have built during His time on earth, it could be simple things like boats. He grew up in Galilee. He grew up in a fishing area. And a carpenter would have built and repaired boats in that area. Perhaps Jesus built some of the boats that the disciples themselves used to fight the wind and the waves on that sea and to bring in a living for their family. Maybe it was the case that He built yokes and built plows. There was also a part of life there. If so, then the words of Jesus on a couple of occasions really ring out to us. What about Matthew 11, 28 through 30, where Jesus said, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." Yoke easy is referring to a well-fitting yoke. If Jesus built yokes, they fit the oxen well. He cared about the oxen. He cared about the way that those yokes fit them. He cares about the way that our yoke fits us. He's a compassionate and caring Savior. We also think about the plow. In Luke 9 and verse 62, Jesus said, "No man, having put his hand to the plow and looking back, is fit for the kingdom of heaven." He knew something about plowing. Perhaps He made some of the plows that those individuals were following in those fields as they were trying to raise a living for their family. It also can include things like repairing things, repairing furniture, broken legs or arms of furniture. It can refer to replacing the spindles on a wagon wheel. Maybe those are the spokes on the wheel. Maybe that's what Jesus was doing. We know at least that the Old Testament describes Him as a repairer of the breaches, as the one who fixes things and restores things and makes things new again. And certainly He's done that many, many times in our lives as we've made a mess of things and we've broken things, and He's brought them back and made them strong again. We think about some other things that maybe are involved in that. If we're considering the aspect of a stonemason, if Jesus was one who carved out those stones and laid those stones, you know what hard work that is. Think about how that Jesus is described in terms of stones. He is the cornerstone, the foundation stone. He is the capstone. He is the keystone. He's all three of those in the Scriptures. The cornerstone is the one that gives organization and design to the building, order to the building. The capstone is the one that connects everything and perfects everything. The keystone is the one that it goes in the arch and it provides the strength for the arch that holds up the whole arch. Well, Jesus is all those things for us. He's our foundation. He's the finish to our lives. He is the strength to our lives. He's every one of those things for us. We certainly can understand that aspect. But probably the idea that we get most when we think about a carpenter in the first century is the one who built houses. That's the way we generally understand the term, and so that's the way that we'll kind of approach our lesson today, is Jesus as a builder of houses, as a carpenter who did that for a living. Well, when we think about the things that Jesus built some impressive things. He really did. First of all, Jesus built this world. I don't know about you, but I'm impressed by it. And every time I get to go see a new aspect of it, see a new country in it, see a new waterfall in it, see a new mountain in it, see a new environment or climate in it, I'm impressed by the builder of this world. Every house is built by some man, and He that built all things is God. Jesus Christ is the builder of all things. Hebrews 3 and verse 4. Not only did He build this world, He built the church, of which you are a part and I'm a part. He said, "I will build my church," Matthew 16 verse 18. That church is called a house in 1 Timothy 3:15, that you may know how you ought to behave yourself in the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and the ground of the truth. And yes, he built the house that we know as our family, or our home. He built that one. In Genesis chapter 2, he's the one that joined Adam and Eve together. He's the one that created that first home. He is the one that gave the order and direction for that first home. He is the one that blessed that home and continues to bless homes throughout the rest of God's Word and throughout today. We think about Genesis, later in Genesis, where we read about Jacob's house being built. God's building that house for Jacob. He's blessing Jacob with those sons and those children that are going to be the tribes of Israel, that are going to continue this seed line that started with Abraham. Well, we see him as a builder of all those things. What is Jesus doing right now? He's still in an aspect of a carpenter, because he's building a place for you and me. He said, I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, there you may be also. John 14, 1 through 3. Now that place that he's preparing for us, that's wedding language. I don't know if you know that or not. It's beautiful language throughout the Gospels, wedding language throughout the Gospels. And sometimes you would ask a groom, when are you going to get your bride? When are you going to get married? He would say, only my Father knows. When my Father tells me, I'll go get my bride. Because the spousal period was usually about a year. He went to the Father's house. He prepared a room at the Father's house. And then at a time when his Father would tell him, he would go get his bride and bring her back to the Father's house. That's the language Jesus is using. Jesus says, I'm preparing a room for you. I'm preparing a place for you. And I'm going to come get you. And I'm going to take you to my Father's house. And looking forward to that wedding feast and all the joys that will surround that. But he's preparing that place for us now. As we think about Jesus as the carpenter, I want us to learn some lessons from this carpenter about building our homes. My dad wasn't a carpenter. He was a UPS driver. But my dad was a carpenter as well, because my dad built a lot of things growing up. He was very good with his hands, very good with wood. I learned a lot of things from him. A lot of things I wish I'd learned that I didn't learn as well as I should have. But I saw my dad with sawdust in his hair a lot of times. And I saw my dad try to save some money by doing things himself a lot of times. And I've laid a lot of hardwood because my wife wanted it, and I couldn't pay for it, have somebody else do it, so I had to learn how to do it. I built stacked stone fireplaces, not because I wanted to, but because she wanted one, and I couldn't do it by paying somebody else to do it. So I learned how to do it, and she was right there with me, helping me. And I'm thankful that God has given me some ability to be able to do some of those things. There's some lessons that I've learned, some lessons that you've learned over the years when it comes to matters of carpentry. Let's consider some of those lessons. First of all, the importance of a blueprint. The importance of a blueprint. Every carpenter knows that. Every house builder knows that. I need a blueprint. I need to see the design of this house. I need to know the size of the rooms, the location of windows and doors. I need to know how things are laid out. I need a blueprint. And I'm going to consult that blueprint, not just on the front end. I'm going to consult it over and over again and make sure that things are according to the pattern that I've been given. Exodus chapter 25 and verse 40, God told Moses that he was to make all things according to the pattern that was shown him in the mount. Remember Brother Goebel Music's book, Behold the Pattern? I don't know of a book that's been written in my lifetime that's been more important to the Lord's church than that book was at the time it was written. And trying to defend the church and protect the church against the new hermeneutic and the whole idea that there wasn't a pattern for us to follow. There is a pattern for us to follow. We better be consulting it and following it. That's true in worship. That's true as we build the church. But it's also true in our homes. God's given us a pattern for the home, and he wants us to follow it. He gave a pattern for raising children in Deuteronomy chapter 6. He gave a pattern for husbands and wives in Ephesians chapter 5. He gave us an example that we are to follow, a rule that we're to follow, Philippians 3:16. We walk according to this rule. But something I learned from my dad growing up was to make a pattern board. You've ever made a pattern board? You know what I'm talking about? You cut one, and then you use that board for the pattern for the others that you're going to cut. You mark things off by it. And it's got to be right, and you've got to follow it correctly. But the pattern board is extremely helpful in building something. Parents, you are the pattern board for your children. You're showing them how to be a husband or wife. You're showing them how to be a mom or dad. And you better be careful and make sure that you're the kind of pattern that you need to be. Because they're going to follow you, and they're going to be like you. Ezekiel 16 verse 44 says, as is the mother, so is the daughter. If you want her to be the kind of wife and mother that she needs to be, then you better be showing her that pattern right now. That we learned that from the carpenter. That's pretty simple. Second lesson we learned from the carpenter is the importance of counting cost. Before you ever get started building something, you got to sit down and do some figuring. I don't like that part of it. I want to just get started. I just want to build. But the important part is sitting down and counting the cost. How much is this going to cost me to build this fence? How much is it going to cost me to add on this room? How much is it going to cost me to build this house? I need to know that because I don't want to get halfway done and run out of money. I don't want to get halfway done and not be able to finish. Jesus talked about that, right? Luke 14, 28 through 32, man building a tower. He sits down first, he counts the cost because he doesn't want to be unable to finish. Before you get married, before you run off with that girl that you love, before you run off with that person that's taking your heart, whatever you've got in mind for the future, before you do that, sit down and count the cost. Sit down and make sure that you've got sufficient within you and they've got sufficient within them to finish that. Because there's a lot of people that get started with it that don't finish it. They quit halfway through and they leave something that is an embarrassment to them and to the church because they didn't finish what they started. We need to finish what we start. Jesus knew that lesson. He taught that lesson. We need to learn. We need to teach our children that lesson as well. And when they get married, they understand the cost. You need to count the cost of being a parent. Don't just say, oh, it'll be so cute and so much fun to have a baby. Yeah, some days it will. And some days it won't be so much fun and it won't be so cute. Some days it'll be a lot of work. The days are long and the years are short. There's some long days in there. There's some sleepless nights in there. There are some difficulties in there, and you better count the cost before you do that. If you're not willing to pay the price of being a parent, don't have a baby. Don't get it started if you're not willing to pay the price for it. And I'm not talking about just the physical price. I'm talking about if you're not going to train them in the way of the Lord, you're not going to spend the time with them that you must spend with them, you're not going to set the example for them, you're not going to do all the things that God tells you to do, don't have them. Don't go down that road. Got to count the cost. Third lesson that we think about that we might learn from a carpenter is the importance of a good foundation. You know that lesson. In Matthew 7, 24 through 27, Jesus talked about two builders, a wise man, a foolish man, one who built his house upon the rock and one who built his house upon the sand, and one that stood and one that fell. You know the story. I don't have to tell you the story. But you remember that Luke, in his account, records things a little differently. Luke talks about the man who builds without a foundation. Because if you're building on the sand, you're building without a foundation because sand isn't a sufficient foundation. You've got to have a good foundation. A lot of people are building their houses without having a knowledge and an understanding of the Word of God. They're not building it on the solid foundation that God's given them. Their house is not going to stand. Luke talks about the man who dug deep in order to get down and find a rock so that he had a sufficient foundation. There's a lot of work in laying a foundation, a good foundation. You need to do that if you want a house that's going to stand. The Bible encourages us to do that. The fourth thing that I think about when I'm talking about building a house or building a home is this: the importance of redeeming the time. Time is money, we say, and that's nowhere is that truer than in carpentry, in building a house. Because there's a lot of money that's involved in building a house. On both the builder's end and the buyer's end. On both sides of that, there's a lot of money invested. There's interest rates involved in that. There's building costs that can go up or down at will. There's a lot of things that are involved in that. You got to count those costs. You got to be careful with the time because time is money and time affects people. And generally speaking, when you're having a house built, there's a date that's set. We plan to have you in your house by this date. And so you make the rental arrangements, you make the loan arrangements, you do everything you can with the time in consideration because time is a part of building anything. And builders get very frustrated and buyers get very frustrated if you don't stay on the time that you've set aside for that. But Jesus understood something about building things and building things on a timetable because he was on a timetable. John 9 and verse 4, he said, I must work the works of him that sent me while it's yet day, for the night's coming when no man can work. Jesus understood, I've got a limited amount of time to build what God's given me to build. And I need to be using the time. We have so many time references in the gospel where his hour's not yet come or his hour had come and all these time references. Jesus was living according to God's timetable. I must be about my Father's business and tell his parents. He knew something about this timetable and he was following that. I remember hearing builders talk about getting the house in the dry. You ever heard anybody talk about that? What do they mean by that? Well, they mean that there's a time for getting the foundation laid and the walls built and the roof on because the winter months are going to come and the months are going to come when the weather's going to change. It's going to be harder to work if you don't have a roof over your head. So they're trying to get the house to the point to where they can do the work that needs to be done in the dry. Parents, I can't tell you enough how important it is to get your house in the dry. What I mean by that is the early years of marriage and parenting are extremely important. You may say, well, they're just little babies. There'll be plenty of time to teach them. There'll be plenty of time to change them. There'll be plenty of time to do this or that. You better get your house in the dry. You better not cut that off because it's going to be over before you know it. God in Deuteronomy 24 and verse 5 talks about marriage, and he gave a stipulation in the Old Testament that you got a year off. When you got married, you got a year off from serving in the army and from other business and other responsibilities because you were supposed to spend that year with your wife. And you were supposed to spend it, according to King James, cheering her up. Because after marriage, she gets kind of discouraged. And so you're going to spend a year getting to know her and encouraging her and building her up, building that good solid foundation for the rest of your marriage. There's a lot of people that get married and they never take any time to get to know and build a good solid marriage. You know, it may be the case that you have children very, very quickly after you get married. But if you can put that off for just a little while, I encourage that. I'd encourage you to get to know the person that you're marrying. You spend some time getting to know them and working out your relationship before you bring somebody else into that relationship that's going to complicate things and make things harder. There's wisdom in doing that. There's wisdom in making that arrangement, getting your house in the dry. That's true with children as well. Those early years in child raising are so important. Because if you waste those years and you don't get that house in the dry, you're going to have a slow way to go ahead. I know a lot of people that after their children get a certain age, they say, well, I need to change some behaviors. I need to change some things. I'm not discouraging them from trying. But I'm saying you wasted some years when you could have been getting the house in the dry before these years came. Because these years are going to be harder to change. If you wait till they're a teenager to try to get control of them, you wait till they're a teenager to try to get them to follow your rules and show you respect, you're fighting a losing battle. You just are. You better get the house in the dry. You better be careful and use the time that God has given you. Let's think about some other lessons that we learned from a carpenter. What about this lesson? The lesson of having a helper. I've had to build and do things sometimes by myself. And I can tell you, it's hard. You ever tried to hold a board in place and nail it at the same time? That's almost impossible. You ever tried to measure a long distance by yourself? That's really hard to do. Sometimes in carpentry, you're forced into doing those kind of things. Sometimes you have to almost build a helper in order to hold one end of it so that you can work on the other end of it. That's time consuming. It doesn't work that well. You need a helper. Sometimes you're on the roof and you need somebody to run, get something and bring it to you. You don't want to go up there that ladder 1,000 times getting what you need. You need a helper. We all need a helper. When it comes to building our homes, you know what we need? We need a helper. And God knew that from the beginning. God said it's not good for man to be alone. I'll make a helpmeet for him. I'll make a helper for him because he needs a helper. You see, the divine assessment was that it was not good. Now, he was the creator, so he's not commenting on what I made. He's commenting on what he made. And the divine assessment up to that point is good, it's good, it's good, it's good, it's good. And then on the sixth day, there's a point at which it wasn't good. It wasn't his flaw. It wasn't his mistake. I think he wanted man to realize what he needed. Man's naming the animals. He's seeing them come by him in pairs. And all of a sudden, Adam says, where's mine? Where's my companion? Where's my helper? And when Adam realized he needed that, then Adam's ready to have surgery. I don't know about you, but most men I know don't volunteer for surgery. We have to be forced into it. We have to be convinced into it. And Adam finally reached, okay, you can take a rib. Okay, you can work on me because I know I need somebody. I need some companionship. And oh boy, was he happy when God presented her to him. What a wonderful exclamation there is in Hebrew when he saw that woman that God had made for him, that helpmate that he so desperately needed. We need that. You know, let me say it this way when it comes to parenting. Dad, your wife needs a helper when it comes to raising those kids. Don't make her do that by herself. Don't make her be the teacher, the disciplinarian, and every other aspect of parenting. Don't make her do that. Don't make her twist your arm to get you to stay home. Don't make her twist your arm to get you to do anything. Don't make her make you feel guilty in order to get you to do what you should already be doing. I know things have changed. I know that what a father used to be is different than what a father is today. And I'm okay with some of that. I've heard stories of when my dad was a dad that they didn't change diapers. Well, you try to be a dad today and not change diapers. You tell me how well that works out for you. I'm telling you, it won't work out for you today. I don't know if we've lost control. I don't know if what's happened, but I'm telling you, there are things that you're going to have to do as a dad today that you didn't have to used to do. And you better be willing to do it, and you better be willing to help her in that. Because we all need a helper, and she needs a helper. She is the guide of the house, 1 Timothy 5:14. She has her role, you have your role, but you better help her. You're asking her to help you, you better help her in that as well. Let's think about another lesson that we learned from a carpenter. What about joining things together, the importance of joining things together? You build individual walls, but you don't leave those walls individual. You join those walls together. You connect those walls. Why do you connect those walls? Well, because they're stronger when they're connected. If they're not connected together, as Jesus said in Mark 3:25, a house divided against itself cannot stand. You better join a house together or that house is not going to stand. You better join the walls together. You better put rafters across the top and connect everything. Because if you don't, it's not going to stand. When the winds blow, when the storms come, if you don't have things well connected, they're not going to hold. You better connect some things. That's true in big terms of building a house. That's also true in little terms of building something else in carpentry. What if you're building a box? You better know how to make a joint and how to bring that two sides together and how to glue them together and hold them together. You know, they had glue in Jesus' day. It was made out of collagen. But they had glue where they glued things together. They knew how to do joints, whether it's a dovetail joint or a box joint. They knew how to do that. They did that kind of work in Jesus' day. That's part of carpentry then. It's part of carpentry now. You've got to know how to do those kinds of things. You know, Colossians chapter 3 talks about love as the bond or the glue of perfection. Love is what glues our families together. We need a lot of glue holding our families together. We need a lot of love holding our marriages and our families together. We need to do that. We need to form these joints. You know, God joins together, Matthew 19 and verse 6. We're not to put asunder. We think about God joining Adam and Eve together, God joining us together. God, He forms strong joints when He breaks two into one, brings us together. Do you know what I see a lot today? I see husband, I see wife, and there's very little intersection of their lives. Very little time that they spend together. The Bible says that we're to dwell with them. 1 Peter 3 and verse 7. There better be some dovetailing of their two lives together. Two better become one, not just in a physical way, but in an emotional way, in a spiritual way, in every way. You better become one. Because if you don't, it's going to be hard to withstand the winds that are blowing in our culture right now. You're going to need to have that bond. You better make sure